want to start today's show first with an apology to viewers and to our guest for my confusion yesterday. A lot of people have seen my interview with Rick, and of course Rick is not this individual's real name. People saw that interview yesterday. I had altered Rick's voice using artificial intelligence to hide his identity and protect his anonymity. I did not alter anything that Rick said, just used AI to change the sound of his voice. Rick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me to help me clarify for viewers. At first, I was quite embarrassed by this mistake, but now I'm actually glad that it happened, because what it's done is it's shown a spotlight on a problem that I fell into that I think probably other people would have as well, simply because of the nature of the way this information came about. And to give everybody the bottom line up front, Rick is not the same individual who was written about by a black insurrectionist, a popular X account that got a lot of traction. Rick is not the same victim who was initially written about by that account. Rick was interviewed by Zach Payne with John Mark Dugan there on Red Pill 78. And I became confused because I had seen a lot of posts from Black Insurrectionist, and Black Insurrectionist even did do a post about Rick. And I just conflated the two accidentally. And then when we started our interview yesterday, because Black Insurrectionist had made a post about Rick, when I commented about it, Rick said, yeah. So I became further confused. And also, we got to keep in mind, Rick has told us he's from Kazakhstan, and so English is a second language for him. And there was a little bit of confusion. And also, we don't know each other. So in an effort to be polite, Rick just presumed that he had misunderstood my question. But to clarify for everyone watching, Rick is a different individual who was not at an Indigo Girls concert, but separately explained to us how he interacted with Tim Walz. Do I have that all correct, Rick?
It is correct, yes. And it took me some time yesterday to realize that, the post you were showing and everything, it was not concerning me exactly. First of all, of course, sometimes I don't understand 100% of things you're saying, but I mostly understand it. I think I'm still, I'm pretty fluent. And another thing, the way I'm sitting, so you're sitting in front of the screen. I have a screen in front of me too, but I'm not looking at the screen for most of the time because you're showing me the pictures of team and family. I don't want to see that at all. So I'm turning around, almost hugging my knees, looking at one point, or just closing then my eyes, and I talk. And whenever you were talking and show me the text, I didn't have time to process your question and read at the same time. But then when you started asking questions about the things that didn't happen to me, I was like,
right,
I need it just to look at the text. So I told you, let me get some water to process. And then I was like, something is very wrong. And then we clarified that. And
yes.
I'm glad I replied that.
And one thing that I need to clarify further, the only part of yesterday's interview that I edited out was that moment where you asked to get some water, because I had made reference to something particularly shocking in this post, and that clearly is what you're talking about now. That made you say, wait a minute, what the hell is Jason talking about? That didn't happen to me. Then you called for the water. So I edited my question about the thing that did not happen to you. I edited that out because even hearing me utter those words, I felt was giving people more of the wrong impression. So after you alerted me that I was confused, I edited something that I said and took out your request to go for water. So I didn't change the content of what you were saying. I left in the part where you said, excuse me, can you please go back to this post? And then you started explaining how I was confused. So I wanted to put out yesterday's interview rather than just completely deleting it and doing another interview with you, because I wanted to go through this confusion. A lot of people have been saying, oh, what happened to this black insurrectionist Doc Net YouTube? He hasn't posted since yesterday. The answer is I don't know. I don't know black insurrectionist slash DocNet YouTube. I have no beef with this person. I have no reason to distrust this person. Right now, my impression is this is a guy who's trying to do the right thing, who has a big Twitter account. He hasn't said anything that I feel is deliberately misleading. This is just a confusing scenario. And because, I don't work at a desk next to this guy, black insurrectionist. We're not part of the same news team. There's no editor coordinating what we're doing. I think we're running into some of the sort of normal issues that would come up with a decentralized citizen journalist effort like this. But it was very important to me, Rick, that we clarify this, because I didn't want to do anything to make you uncomfortable. I think you've been very brave coming forward here in your adult life to speak about these things that happened to you during your teenage years. And this is my presumption, because you must realize that there are other you said it yesterday, there are other teenagers out there who might be facing the same kind of confusion that you did. And maybe your telling of this story will help these other people to realize, hey, wait, I don't know Rick, but there is an adult with some wisdom and experience speaking sensibly about things that are happening to me. Maybe this helps me think about my situation more clearly. Is that where you're at, would you say?
Yeah, the bottom line, the main idea is just for people, and maybe it would be perfect, other exchange students, just to talk about their problems. And maybe if somebody else hears about this interview, they would make a better job with kids, telling them what to do in such cases. So this is the reason why.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important that you did do that. And then I also saw that there were a number of stories coming out today trying to basically discredit all of the reports. See, this is the other thing that became very interesting to me, because, Rick, you and I just met for the first time yesterday, and I want to thank John Mark Dugan again for facilitating that. But I talk a lot about social engineering, and there's a lot of times when there's a damaging story like this, the social engineers will try to get in front of it, and it doesn't always make sense to regular people how that might happen. But one of the things that I see them doing is they try to get right up to a dangerous story and put wrong information in there to confuse people. Do you know what I'm talking about? While it might seem that most people would want to get away from a story that could damage them, there's a tactic that I've observed where they get right up to the story and they start to mix people up so that eventually they maybe can prove me or black insurrectionist or somebody, prove us wrong, and then say, see, everything that anybody was talking about having to do with Tim Walz in high school was false. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I kind of get it. Yes, I think I get it in general. There are many different things concerning the topic. I mean, well, when everybody says, when I say everybody says, I'm referring to the only time I've read the comments. It was only once. Rick is brave. I'm not brave at all, because I don't want people to know my identity, because in my opinion it would definitely destroy my life. But the thing I could potentially do, I could show all the documents with my name and all the numbers and everything that clarify my identity and my being in that school. I have sent, I don't know if you have them, the documents that clarify that I was an exchange student during that year. I have my visa and everything and everything and everything and all the other documents that confirm. But I'm not brave because I don't want my identity to be known, because in my opinion it would definitely make my life worse. But meantime, I know that I'm persuaded like 100%, even though I do that and destroy my life, those people will get away with everything, whatever I do. And I've decided to do this mainly just for the other exchange students and younger people and children and teenagers. Just to talk about it and to know that it can happen. And maybe some other, maybe I can call them institutions, can talk more about it.
I mean, it makes sense what you're saying to me. I have not received those documents, but maybe John Mark Dugan or Red Pill 78 has them. But again, I mean, you're being very open here. I will respectfully disagree. I think you are being brave, and what you're saying makes sense. If you came forward with your identity and everything, it is a high likelihood that it would be used against you, and a low likelihood that anything would really happen to Tim Walz. So I do appreciate and understand your desire to keep your identity secret, and I think it is important. See, here's this interview. So here's Black Insurrectionists showing people that you're doing the interview with Red Pill 78, and there is Dugan sitting there. I think this is a guy who's trying to do the right thing and just got either accidentally caught in the middle of something confusing or, as I said, deliberately set up by social engineers, because Tim Walz, somebody wants this guy to be vice president. And as you've said, you've got documentation. Talk to us a little bit more about this Flex program, because that is something that came up. You had asked me in our interview if I had seen your previous interview with Red Pill 78. And this isn't a criticism of Red Pill 78, but I started watching it, and the first 12 or so minutes were mostly stuff about just the operation of his channel, how to get to it on Rumble and how to subscribe to it and introducing things. So I started kind of skipping through it and just heard you talking and heard little pieces of it and was like, oh, okay, this guy's interviewing the victim and he knows Dugan, so let me call Dugan. And just in my short conversation in Dugan and connecting to you, I didn't break through any of my confusion. But what I think is happening now, Rick, is that this story is really growing legs, as they say, meaning it's starting to take off. And a lot of people are talking about it because not just the evidence that you've brought forward, and I think it's very compelling. I don't detect anything that you've said as being untrue. And I don't think, you've explained in great detail. You have no motive for putting out this untrue story. But separately, it aligns with what we can observe with Tim Walz. Like I was asking you yesterday, and I understand that you haven't interacted with his wife, but maybe you've seen on television, Tim Walz, during one of the most obviously important moments of his life, he's been nominated to be the Vice President of the United States of America, and he's up there on stage, and he shakes his wife's hand. This struck me as bizarre before I ever saw your story. I mentioned to you that I was previously married, twice actually, and when I went to the immigration services, for this interview where they want to figure out if this is a real marriage or if you're just lying for immigration status, the interview lasted about 40 seconds because it was so obvious that I was in love with this beautiful Brazilian woman who was 16 years younger than me. I didn't walk in there shaking her hand. And what I'm getting at is, this is just obviously weird. Who the hell shakes their wife's hand, and particularly at such an emotionally charged moment? What do you think of that?
Well, for me personally, I cannot tell anything, any criticism of this picture, even though I wanted to tell something unpleasant, but I don't want to do that because I think people are very different, and maybe their reaction to different scenarios are very different too. And maybe this is just a person who acts like that during situations like that. I don't know, and I actually, believe me or not, I don't Google him and I don't watch news with him. I have anything to do with like all of those news. Of course, I knew some details now, but I definitely not don't try to read or watch anything connected with him because like this is not the thing I would like to do.
I understand. And that makes sense too. See, everything you're saying makes sense. That's interesting. So how did you originally connect with John Mark Dougan? How did the story come about in the first place?
Well, I know, I wouldn't call it a friend of mine. It's just, well, a mate, not a very close friend, a mate, I don't know, how do you call it? He's a journalist in Kazakhstan. Well, he knows me and my problem, and I would say I could trust that guy, and this is the guy who knew Mark Dougan, and this is the guy who connected me with Mr. Dougan. So just from another man,
Right.
I got to know, and yeah.
See, again, everything you're telling us makes perfect sense because people were like, oh, a lot of people saw our interview and sent me mostly positive comments, but there's always people who are going to have something stupid to say. And people were like, oh, how come, this is all coming from Dougan? How is Dougan the source of everything? But what you just said explains it and it makes sense. Dougan is an American guy in Moscow, and for a long time he was doing a lot of coverage of the war. I think that a lot of international journalists were following him, and it just makes sense that people, like you just said, in that region know him. Somebody knows you. He had dozens of thousands of followers on, like 40, 50, 60,000, maybe more on Rumble. But that just makes sense. He was gaining traction in former Soviet republics by going around to Ukraine and covering the war in ways that maybe other journalists weren't, and you get introduced to him. It all makes a lot of sense. I'm feeling really, there's nothing you've said that I don't believe.
Well, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. So again, today's interview, I guess, will be a little bit shorter than what we had yesterday. I think we covered a lot of the facts and details yesterday. I really do appreciate you taking time to join me to further disambiguate this situation, to bring clarity to it for everybody, because it is confusing and complicated, and it is one of these stories that social engineers like to dive on to try to confuse people further. Is there anything else you think we should talk about?
Well, there is, so there was one moment when I started reading the comments, which I didn't really like, and I didn't continue doing that. But there is one interesting and very tricky thing to discuss, and I'm not sure if you want to include it into the interview. So if you want it, you can cut it, or because I wanted to clarify to many people. So when I was sent the link to your video, I have seen that my voice was changed, and thank you for. And I've seen only one comment, because it was one about that. Isn't it AI talking? Wasn't it written or anything? My voice was changed because I've asked journalists to change it. And you did it in a very good way, because you cannot tell if it is a person or AI. I appreciate that. But during my Redfield interview, you could hear my accent. And some of the people were telling, what's up with the accent? It sounds like Russian, or it sounds like Ukrainian accent. I've seen the comments. So I would like to clarify that if we talk about Kazakhstan, and if you talk about Kazakhstan 20 years ago, guess what? People speak Russian there, and in Ukraine people spoke Russian, and all over those countries the native language of the people is Russian. As a matter of fact, many people wouldn't know Kazakh language at all. So this is a totally normal thing that I wanted to mention, because many people don't realize that people, maybe not now, maybe now the situation is a little bit different, but 20 years ago, most people in Kazakhstan were Russian natives. And if you hear people in the government on the television, when they talk about government things, what language they use? Also Russian. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to reply to that comment because it was like stuck in my head because it's not an obvious thing because you never know. You think, oh, it's another country and it's very different from and other countries. But yeah, this is an interesting thing I wanted to mention.
I'm glad you brought that up. And again, everything you're saying rings true because I have spoken about this a lot, even to you. I was married to a Ukrainian woman, 2003 to 2007, and she only spoke Russian. We went to Ukraine in 2003 and people asked if she spoke Ukrainian, and it was like laughable to presume that it was like an ancient lost language almost. I agree with you that now, due to nationalism and the war and other factors, perhaps that's changing. But yes, it was obvious to me that people in Kazakhstan speak Russian. And, it's interesting because I went to see, did you ever see the movie Finding Nemo about that fish that gets lost?
I know it, but I've never watched it, unfortunately.
So in the film, there is a scene, the story of the film is that this young fish gets lost and the father is, traveling the ocean to find the fish. And there's a scene where he's going through the Atlantic Ocean and he meets these lobsters and the lobsters say something to the fish, but the lobsters have a Boston accent. And I was watching this with my Ukrainian ex-wife and I was cracking up at what the lobsters said. And I said, do you get it? And she said, yes, they're talking lobsters. And I said, no, they have a Boston accent. And that's the type of subtle humor that would be very difficult. Even somebody like you who's been embedded in American society and is quite fluent in English, that's the type of subtle detail that is just lost in translation. So for somebody to listen to an AI altered version of your voice and be able to determine that you're from Kazakhstan or Belarus or Ukraine or Russia, it's a little bit ridiculous. No one would really be able to do that, right?
Well, yeah, if it is AI, it's definitely hard to say. I could speak Kazakh right now, but that would be too funny.
Yeah. But no one would understand it. And also, by the way, I went to a trial not that long ago that was the city of Almaty, Kazakhstan versus Felix Sater. And everybody in there was, on the plaintiff side was Kazakh and sounded, I can't tell them apart from a Russian person or a Ukrainian. I mean, just sounds Russian.
You mean the Kazakh language?
I'm saying they spoke to me in English, but their accent and everything, I can't tell the difference.
Well, still I believe that many people from Almaty, for example, they speak Russian too. I mean, I don't, well, now, like the last 5 or 7 years maybe, I see more Kazakh speaking people, and this is perfectly fine. This is great, but most of the people speak Russian, and whenever you speak to someone, you just use Russian. This is how it is. I cannot say that it is good or bad. It's just the fact of the person who lives in Kazakhstan.
And just like I might be able to tell the difference between somebody who's from New York, somebody who's from Philadelphia, and somebody who's from Chicago just by hearing them speak a little bit, that would be really difficult for an ESL person to do. I imagine it's possible if you grew up in Kazakhstan, you might be able to detect the difference in an accent from somebody who is from Almaty versus somebody from Astana. No?
No way. No, I don't think it works like that. No.
So I guess the United States is just bigger and has more accents.
I think so, yeah. Especially like Indian accent, which is hard to understand.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, now when you get into foreign accents, right. Well, we've gone far afield from our initial conversation, but it's still good because we're getting to the subtle details of communication and language, and this played a role in the confusion that I unfortunately participated in yesterday. So I really want to thank you, Rick, first of all, for coming forward with your story. It does take a lot of bravery, and I would encourage you not to diminish that. It was a brave act for you to do, and it's smart to keep your identity secret. You don't need to, all these people were saying, oh, this guy needs to do a deposition and subpoenas and everything. Rick doesn't need to do anything. First of all, he's in another country. Second of all, he's not trying to do a lawsuit or anything like that. And that's another thing. If you were somebody coming forward saying, oh, I want to sue Tim Walz or this Kamala Harris campaign for millions of dollars, that might be cause to question your motives. But I think you've been very clear. I want to thank you for helping me clarify further today. I want to thank you for coming forward. And anything else at all that you'd like to say, please do.
Well, I think that I'm glad that we clarified all of the things about yesterday, and I hope maybe the listeners and the viewers will have a more clear picture of the story, and they will see the reason why I decided to do it. And I think this is important. And I'm glad they won't be confused about the different stories. And I'm glad that there are some other people who are willing to talk about it too. And I think this is important. And I think it's not important. It is stupid in my case, I want to repeat it, to start, I would call it a war when you know you will lose. In my opinion, it's like that about the this whole situations and lawyers, and there is no way, in my opinion, that when you are just a regular person I know no one. I'm just a regular person who works, who has a family, and I don't want to destroy my life, and I don't have a backup of the government or anything, and I don't want to start a fight that I will definitely lose. But at least I did something, and I'm satisfied with that pact.
I think you did a great thing, and I think you are winning this fight. I want to thank you again for joining us, Rick. I want to thank everybody for watching. Rick, have a great day. If you ever want to talk again, you've got an open invitation on this show. And thanks for everything that you've done.
Thank you. If you've got some other questions, you're very welcome to send them. Thank you very much for your time.
And thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.